Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost, and it's Friday, so this is the TRU Community Gathering. That's just how it works, guys. Um, of course, those of you who are just finding us and randomly finding us out on YouTube, I want to let you know a little bit about who we are. We're an arts services organization in Manhattan that's sort of as a result of shutdown and COVID, grew internationally because we went virtual. So now I have audiences that are coming in from all over the country and sometimes all over the world. Um, but we are Manhattan based, and we've always basically focused people, artists and producers, all on the business of theater. So if you're interested in the business of theater, you found us, email us, be part of us. Um, these conversations started as a community service because of the aforementioned COVID. The aforementioned COVID sort of took over our lives, as everybody remembers. And many of us just didn't know what to do with ourselves. So I opened up a Zoom room and brought people in, and we've been talking about whatever feels important at the time. So the conversations now are not as focused on COVID and shutdown and isolation as they are on just basic information about theater. Always looking for interesting people who have interesting things that they're doing. And I happen to know this woman named Lorca Peress, and it's just, I happen to become aware of the fact that she was connected to something. Who knew? It's called the Femme Collective. Um, so with that, all that means is that three companies, Lorca's company, uh, Kate Mueth's company. You're going to help me pronounce your name. Okay, Mueth, and D. Davis's company, Eden Theater, MultiStages, and Neopolitical Cowgirls, just to be specific, got together and found ways coming out of COVID. Um, we all had a hard time adjusting and finding ways to afford to go forward with what we were doing. It was hard. It was hard enough when we were trying to figure out how to do everything virtually. It's like now that we're live, it's like we have to rethink everything in terms of how to make it happen live. So I was very impressed by the fact that the three companies got together. For 32 years, and that's how long I've been doing this. For 32 years, I've been a proponent, or at least a suggester, of people working together and finding collective ways of sharing expenses and producing things together. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There are things that are good about it. There are things that are challenging about it, and we're going to kind of look at all that today. So I'm gonna bring my friends in one at a time. I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start with the known quantity, Lorca. Lorca, I'm gonna have you come in and say hello to everyone and tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, Bob. You're so sweet. It's nice to be here, everyone. This is a very interesting process, how this all evolved. First of all, I'm Lorca Peress. I'm artistic director and founder of MultiStages, a theater company in New York. We are a multicultural and multidisciplinary company who develop and uh, find new works to present through readings, festivals, full productions, and script development series. So what happened was Diane, Kate, and I are all members of the League of Professional Theater Women. And we were all on a Zoom, of course. That's all we do now is
What
Zoom.
else? What else is there, right?
Yeah, we were on a Zoom meeting for the league. And we were all, crying about the complications of what we're involved in right now, trying to get work published, I mean, produced and published, but trying to get work produced and what was happening, the challenges we were facing financially, trying to find theaters that were available, et cetera, et cetera. And so we talked about maybe starting some kind of an organization or a subchapter of the league where we're women collective, kind of talking about our theater companies and trying to sort of start a support group. And that idea developed into what we call the Femme Collective.
And I'm going to hold
And
you. I'm going to hold you there because we're
yes,
going to come back to that.
okay,
Because
all right, I'll stop.
I want to introduce my other two guests. So
Please.
I'm going to have Dee Davis come on from Eden Theater Company.
Yeah.
Hi, welcome, Dee.
Hi. Hi. Um, I I'm actually a playwright who was very interested in building a company for new playwrights and or emerging playwrights in particular, women, and of course other marginalized groups. And I started this company actually with my daughter, who is an actress, and we started our play labs. And in the play labs, we would have three playwrights and a host full of actors, and the playwrights would have the opportunity to develop their play with actors in the room, and then we would perform these in an open reading event. And we had our first production. We do one production a year. We had our first production before COVID, and then we got knocked out by COVID and did a series of things online, and then came out of COVID, did a production, and it was difficult because coming out of COVID was really problematic. It was twice the amount that we had anticipated spending, and so it was a company then in search of new ways to do new theater.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Why Eden? Why did you pick the name?
That's a good question. Someone asked me that the other day, and I was in the car with my daughter, and we were actually writing a play in the car together. She was typing, I was driving, and we were talking. And then at the end of it, we had this scene, and I said, "We need a name for our company." And before we even talked about it, she's just looking at me, and I said, "It's got to be Eden Theater, things that like emerge out of a desperation and need for things." And because a real Eden in the ancient context is actually an oasis in the middle of a desert, which is a very desperate situation. And out of that desperation, you have this sort of beauty in creating creation emerge. So
Okay, great story. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to bring Kate Mueth on now, and then I'm going to bring all three of you on. But first, let's meet Kate.
Hi, thank
Hi,
you for
Kate.
hi, everybody. Happy solstice.
Oh, that's right. Yes, it's June 20th. My goodness.
It's- yeah,
What a perfect day to be doing this.
perfect day. Yeah, yeah. So, I'm Kate Mueth. I have the Neopolitical Cowgirls. We're in our 18th season. Basically started because I was going on auditions. I was a young mother, and I grew really disenfranchised emotionally, and disenchanted and frustrated with going to these auditions and being given scripts that I just didn't see myself in. It didn't speak to me. It felt very flat and very surface, and I knew that certainly if I felt like that as a white actress, then my Asian friends and my black friends and my brown friends probably had it 1,000% worse. So I made a very strong choice to kind of exit that paradigm and say, the success won't look the same. It'll be really hard, but I'd rather give my time and my life to making stories and spaces where we can really tell the stories we want to tell. We can really get wild and get deep and get free and be unencumbered to write and stage what we really feel like, speaking about. So that's why I started the company that we have now. And I see Cindy Cooper on here. We just highlighted one of her monologues, the brief at our gala. I'm based in East Hampton on the end of the island here, and this is our home. We launch everything here, take things sometimes to off Broadway, internationally, regionally. And we were so lucky to have Cindy's piece included in our gala, read by Emma Tattenbaum Fine. Mercedes Rule was one of our actors. Kathy Curtin was one of our actors. And we just love making space for women and their voices and their visions. So that's really where our heart is. Yeah.
And I'm sure that does the heart's good of many people in this room to hear that. Same question, though. I asked why Neopolitical Cowgirls?
Oh, because new politics. We're going to make the politics that we want, which is everyone's welcome at the table, where every human has a story to tell, short of, we don't welcome fascists at the table. We have our we have taste, but we want everyone's stories at the table equally. And the Cowgirls part is just, the unfettered wildness, the surety, the adventurous spirit, the not being told what to do aspect of it. So it's just really about human inclusion.
Okay, well, let me start bringing others in. Give me a second. Add spotlight. And here comes Lorca. Okay, here we are. I'm going to take the spotlight off of me. I'm going to put myself on the bottom of the screen. I don't want to be at the top here. So, while I'm getting myself back on the screen, let's focus on the three of you though. Let's talk about you jumped ahead, Lorca. You jumped ahead. You started talking about being on the Zoom with League of Professional Theater Women, and you talked about how difficult you were all having problems coming back into live production. But you and I have talked about this in the past, how ironic it was that when we moved into shutdown, nobody could figure out what to do. It's like, how do we do this virtually? And suddenly, we're coming back into live. We go, oh my God, how do we do this live? How do we afford to do this live? So the lesson there, I guess, is just that life is just full of challenges. We always have to find solutions. So the three of you, seem to have found a solution. We'll talk about how what things worked, how you did it, and we'll also talk about some of the bumps in the road, because I know, having advised people to do just this for 32 years, I've seen the bumps in the road. It's not always easy, but congratulations on the effort. I think it's worthy, and I think we need to hear more about it and how it worked. So here I am now.
Thank you.
So who wants to start? You want to tell us about who was one of you a guiding force? Somebody had to be leading this. Did one of you lead?
Lorca.
Why am I not surprised? I don't know.
Well, I didn't really talk much about MultiStages, but I just want to say I founded, MultiStages became a company in 1997. Who wasn't born? Don't talk to me. Yeah, 1997. So that's a long time ago. And I was really going through grief, to be honest with you. I was grieving during the pandemic. I was terrified and really upset. And by the way, it's nice to see you too. We haven't seen each other in a while. So I think what kind of started for me was I was worried about money, and I was worried about audience. And that was a big part of this decision making, was how do we bring the people into the room over a longer period of time? And so, we didn't really want to spend all this energy. We had a big production with a lot of multimedia. It was expensive. We had a lot of people involved. We had a company of 30 people, like behind the scenes. It was a huge thing. And we didn't want to just do it for, it's 7 performances. So that was part of the conversation, was how to be able to do it and share time and possibly pick up audiences from each other, right? And that became sort of the beginning of the conversation, that we could do something in Reparatory. And then that way I have a production, you have a production, then Kate has production, Diane has a production. We would just sort of go back and forth and create a timeline for everybody to work. And that was sort of the beginning idea for us, was, can we do a Reparatory run?
Am I right in assuming that your styles, the three of you, have completely different styles in terms of your producing?
In terms of producing, yeah, but
in terms of productions,
in terms
too.
of aesthetics,
yeah. In terms of the aesthetics, probably, well, because Kate, you have a lot of dance at your root. Is that correct? Yeah.
We're a dance theater company. We're a very physical company.
Yeah. And so where Lorca is interdisciplinary, I do I do plays, and usually it enhanced by the elements rather than being driven by the technology.
And I actually think it's interesting that you would do in Reparatory uh, three works from three different companies that represent three different styles. Um, I think that's a plus.
Yeah.
And there was something that brought us, that sort of connected us all.
Yeah.
I mean, not just that
All
we're women.
women-centered stories. They were
What-
women-centered stories,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that's really what the Femme Collective is about, is to some degree at the root, each of us as femmes,
Right.
it's our our stories, feminine aesthetics.
Right.
So let's talk about the specifics of it. Where did the money come from? Did you all three do separate fundraising campaigns, or did okay, not as one collective?
Well, that was a question with my accountant on the first day. I called him up and I said, all right, Alan, so this is what we want to do. How do we do this? Do we need to get a bank account? And he said, you know what, Lorca, why don't you try doing it independently, bring the money together, and then if it's something that you want to do again, then you could create an LLC and a bank account and all that. And that became a much easier way. We were all in agreement with that. So, yeah, we self-funded.
Who?
Yeah.
The last thing you need is to bring into all the possible, a cornucopia of things that could be challenging due to different ways of doing things. The last thing you want to bring into that pot is how we deal with money. And so it was very freeing, actually, just to be like, oh, we can all stay in our lane and deal with it how we need to deal with it. And so that's I think, a very important aspect and a thing to remember when people do work as collaborators, company wise, that keep the money separate.
Yeah. Find the common budget. I think the budgeting was really important. Um, we this happened really actually quickly too. So I think that when you talk about positives and negatives, like putting it and only having a 6 month, not even a 6 month window, we had maybe a 4 or 5 month window, 4 month window, which is pretty short time frame. That actually can, when you have to pool everything together and have this constant, very clear communication on what the expectations are, what the needs are, and all that, that can be a negative. That is a negative, I think. Doesn't easily solved, just plan ahead.
One thing that happened was originally we all wanted to do different amounts of performances.
Oh.
And that was a killer budget. So that was something we learned really quickly.
Oh.
Yeah, like Diane at the beginning wanted to do 5 shows. Kate wanted to do 8, I think. I wanted to do like 16. We were all,
we were based on our own budgets, just to be clear.
Yeah, it was understood. But we eventually got to, let's just split it down the middle. So we each get 10 shows for the run. We share the tech. We did share certain things. We shared venue.
I was going to start
Yeah.
there. Who found the
Yeah.
venue, and was there a little bit of a challenge finding a venue that suited all three of your work?
I was a huge advocate for the 14th Street Y. I love the 14th Street Y. I've done other productions there. I've always had great success there, and it's a beautiful space. I like the fact that it's very indie based, but it's a huge, gorgeous theater.
But I'm thinking
And they
that
also-
Kate probably needs a dance floor for your
Yes,
performances.
we needed the dance space. We needed the space is what we really needed, all of us. And so what happened was a year before, I swear to God, an entire year before, I was in conversation with the 14th Street Y, at that point, just doing my own show. And they were shifting their whole team. The whole team was replaced. So all the people I was in communication with, they had a big changeover. It was all pandemic based, And then they brought in this wonderful man, Philip Trevino, who I was then saying, look, I've been in conversation with these people for 6 months. Can you honor me and put me in the lineup, and so we finally got in, and then everybody came to see the venue and loved it, and so that was solid.
Yeah.
So did you separate did you do it in Reparatory or did you do your separate time frames?
We did it in Reparatory, which is really an asset. That's a real positive. And for me, we had done this during COVID. We had done a lot of Zoom plays and they were live, but we did them over like 3 weekends, 4 weekends, having 3 or 4 performances each weekend. And that way you're allowed a volume of people and spread over time. And so the Reparatory allowed us all to have that advantage of building an audience over the month. And I would have never, ever been able to do that without a collaborative because the cost alone would have been 2/3 of my budget.
Okay, question. Storage. In one word, storage.
We were brilliant. We were brilliant, Bob. Everything fit in like the smallest little footprint you can find. We stacked. And they had wings. They had spaces for us to store our we were really
we had a baby grand piano.
An awful throwaway theater with wings. You had wings.
Well, we had I mean, the 14th Street Y. Everybody,
there's beautiful. A lot of space, and the dressing rooms were very plentiful because Kate had the largest cast, and they all fit in well in your room, and then Lorca and I shared the other room, which housed 5, or I guess capable of 6, but 5 comfortably. And so the dressing rooms are really important because a lot of places don't have dressing rooms that are very big, but also the space. Like I was saying, we had a baby grand piano. I had a bunch of chairs. Kate had, well, Kate, you were kind of sparse, but you had your drawings and things like that. She had a place to put that. And Lorca had furniture, and we were able to find plenty of room, even more room if we needed it.
Is one of you a Virgo?
Capricorn.
Okay, maybe. Because this is quite a challenge, what you're talking about. I mean, you sound like you got through it fine, but I think other people could kill themselves.
Yeah, we were really smart. I mean, I did the Nymph Show, as Annika, my fabulous sister, mentioned. I did the Nymph Show, and Nymph at the time, they would give you literally, I think it was like 5 by 5, and you had to put an entire, production within that 5 by 5. That included costumes, Bob. That included costumes. So I had my brilliant set designer, Jennifer Varbelow. She's like, stack. Yeah.
Oh, I know her.
Yeah, Jen. Well, she was my set designer on this too. But we were so smart about how we organized it, and we had to make adjustments. So we did.
Have you thought about running a manual for other people? Because it sounds like you did this successfully. I've over the years, I've seen people that have just been at each other's throats, but I've seen some that have worked. I mean, I think the idea basically is a smart one, and I think that collaborative producing, I think, is very smart if you can make it work. And you obviously did make it work, so kudos to you.
One more thing.
I probably wouldn't have you on if it hadn't worked.
No, we probably wouldn't be here.
One more thing, though, we had a really smart production manager who was in charge of all the transitions. So we had time for the transitions. They knew exactly what had to be done. It was very clearly run, pretty smooth. And every company had their strike and setup really tight. We're pros.
Let's also be clear. Our work, we also created work that didn't require, it was minimal, rather than maximal. And if people are hanging on, it doesn't work if people are hanging on to, goods that they have to have, and without that, and they feel like people are curtailing them, that probably wouldn't work. And because we really had, like, I had a piano and 5 chairs. Basically, we strung things up rather than a lot of things on the floor.
Your chandelier.
I had the chandelier. We pulled the chandelier up. Like, you really had to be mindful of your partners and what their needs were, and then how are you solving those problems for them, and then working collaboratively like that. But if you're, going to choose a piece that requires a lot of set, repertory is not for you. It's
Unless everybody works on that same set.
yeah.
So you brought up a point that I think is important, which is the common staff versus the individual staff. So you had one person who was your production manager for all three
Yeah.
plays. I know, I believe that you had Katie Rosen as your publicist. So you weren't doing three different
No, we had one
publicity.
publicist and we share the expenses. Kate, you want to talk about it a little bit?
Sure. I mean, yeah, so Katie was wonderful. And I think it behooves the publicist as well to be in lockstep with all of the productions as well. I think it's useful because it gives them a storyline, a through line. It's not, it's a unified front. And I also just find, and this is, look, this is just part of growing up, isn't it? Of like the importance of healthy communication. It's really imperative. And it's also a chance to be working with people. I know Lorca, I've known her. Diane and I had just met on this project. And we have to all in the theater. I think it's a great opportunity to practice detoxifying the rooms, right? To find ways of and how I can be a better communicator, how I can be a better listener, how I can be a better team player. And it was like having these three microcosms in a macrocosm, and we all had to work together in that way. And like Diane was saying, be mindful of each other's ideas. And it's a great opportunity for learning just how do I communicate? What do I bring to the table? Where do I need to work on my communication in the world of this industry? How can I be a more supportive communicator? How can I advocate for what I need or what my cohorts need? It's so in that kind of way, the challenge that was the only like the challenge, and it was really about a self-awareness challenge of self-observation of how do I work with, one person who I didn't know at all, one person who I knew but had never worked with before. I didn't know their styles of work.
Right.
What you're describing is collaboration. basically,
Right? I mean, the capital C, right?
everybody knows that theater is a collaborative medium, and yet how many people are so ego driven that
Yeah.
they neglect the communication part of it. They neglect to be collaborative. I know people who think they're collaborative,
Mhm,
but
mhm, mhm.
they think it, but they don't necessarily act it. What you're describing sounds like a truly collaborative situation. So again, congratulations on that.
Well, one of the other things that I think that is most important when you have the minimalist set was the lights. Because we didn't have sets, the lights became very important. So one of the things we shared was getting extra lights, which was a big expense and is a big expense. It is probably the norm now for most productions. I worked on another production that overlapped. They too spent the same amount for the same products we were getting for our small space. They were getting it for the art space. So that was important. And, because, and you two had shared the lighting designer, and I probably could have shared that lighting designer too. I mean, that might have been an asset because that would have put everybody on, a lighting grid together. But I guess having my guy actually assisted their lighting
Right.
because he was the one
Right.
having lights. He had the muscle. And
But we're talking about something very complicated. Finding a grid that works for three plays, it's not
yeah,
just
grid, but
it doesn't
also
just happen.
and
Right.
designers who are really collaborative to work on the three different plays and what that lighting design would demand, since that is the primary element outside of set, that really sort of had to be different, for
Yeah,
The
everybody.
pro-
it was very clever, and they were in touch. It was Kia Rogers,
Yeah.
and what was the other,
Willem
Mitch?
Hinternhoff.
Say it
Yeah.
again, please. Willem.
Willem Hinternhoff.
That's
Uh,
right.
yeah. So they
And
were,
they had a lot of meetings together in advance.
yeah.
So, we had to cover a lot of ground there. And we weren't doing, it wasn't the Soho Festival, it wasn't the Fringe Fest where you're sort of up and out. We really we were putting on gorgeous productions. They were 3 gorgeous productions physically, and a lot.
Because you weren't doing 90-minute segments and then
I mean,
15
these
minutes in,
was
15 minutes out.
they were full shows, and
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
really exciting to have it happen.
Yeah.
What was your performance schedule? I'm curious. I have a couple specific questions, but let's start with that one.
Well, we each had 10 shows. We knew we each needed a Saturday night. We each needed a Thursday night. We each needed a Friday night. We all had to have a matinee, a Sunday matinee. And then we also added in a Saturday matinee, and we added in a Wednesday, 2 Wednesday matinees. So we did 30 shows over 3 weeks.
We had the Sunday night slot.
Oh, that's right. There was a Sunday night.
Popular, I think. I don't know about you guys, but it was for me.
It worked for you, yeah.
No, it was.
Oh, it was not so popular. Okay.
You know, in the winter on a Sunday night is hard, but
yeah, we all had one really like a clunker, a Tuesday or something. Yeah.
What was the other? I was going to ask you something else. Collaborative. Oh boy. Okay, say something while I'm thinking. What can I ask you?
Hey, so I'll tell you what we shared.
The other things that we have to parse is you had 2 lighting designers, one plus for 2 of you and one for this is the question I had in my mind, and it's a big question for everybody. What contract were you on? Were you using union people? And if so, tell us how that worked.
All right, I'll do this one because I worked under an equity showcase code, which meant that, but Diane did not.
Yes, I did.
Oh, no, you did. Kate did not, right? Kate did not. And so because we had one show that was not under equity, we had to have a non-equity production manager. Because you cannot have, because we made the decision to share, and they turned out to be terrific. So that was the one caveat. That was the one change. But yeah, so we worked under showcase code.
Yeah.
Okay. But Kate, you didn't work under showcase code.
Nope, I had
you also had the large cast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they're primarily dancer people. They've been with my company, some of them for a while, who have become more text-oriented performers, which is exciting to have them walk them to the other side a little bit. It's a dance theater piece, the She-Wolves, and so it was probably 50% text, but 50% dance movement as well, telling the story. So I had just come off a show, the same show from out here being outdoors and having had 2 equity contracts. And as an equity actor myself, I love equity. I love union all the way. But producerily, it can be very challenging, as I'm sure people know too.
It becomes very expensive sometimes.
Very expensive, very challenging. Yeah.
Showcases are a great way to keep those contract expenses lower. But what it does require you is that you can only have half of it, that you have your weekday and your weekend have to be equal. So there's a little bit of a trick there in that you can't have, you really have to have that equity. And that's something I encountered that I never knew because we always did.
Yeah, could you explain that a little bit better?
Well, if you have an equity contract, you have to have an equal amount of performances on the weekend with the weekdays. So you can't have all your performances just on the weekends. There has to be equity.
I didn't know that either.
I didn't know that either.
I mean, I know shows that just do Friday,
They
Saturday, Sunday.
rejected my contract until I was able to come up with an extra performance.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know that either.
Yeah.
The one thing though that we ran into trouble was because it was during the holiday, was when we started. I had wanted to start on December 1st. The show we loaded into the theater on my birthday, January 2nd, which was actually a beautiful birthday gift. I was so happy to be inside a theater to do a show. I can't tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I thought we could start December 1st and then be dark during, Christmas and Hanukkah, which were the same actually last year, and also New Year's.
Rarity.
Yes, it was. So I thought we would take the week, a whole week off, and they said, "Oh no, you can't do that. You can't do that." So we had to start our rehearsals a week later in order to run until February 1st. Yeah.
Okay, so back to one of the general questions, which is common staff and common and individual staff. So you probably shared house staff. Am I
Yes.
correct?
They provided house
They
staff.
provided
Oh, they
that.
did.
I think our music guy, our QLab guy, was like all three of us, right? Which was important, the board people. And I had my own assistant. You had, did you have an assistant, Kate? Yeah. So we each had our own assistant, but then there was the board stage manager for all three pieces.
And then we each had whatever we needed on for board ops because I had an A1 who was running
Yeah,
the
I did too.
microphone. You had an A1, right?
But the QLab programmer was sort of common for all
Right.
three of us.
So here's my question to the room, because I'm trying to draw out as much information for you as I can. But if you are interested, even mildly interested in the idea of collaborative producing with another company, what do you need to know? What would you like to ask? Any questions? Judith Binus, I see that you started to ask a question, but I don't know what happened.
I decided not to.
Oh, you decided not to. Okay. Do you want to ask it or
Can we
no?
say what we shared?
Oh yeah, sure.
Because I think that's important. So we made the decision to share, as I said, the production manager, stage manager. We shared the PR. We shared the social media. And we shared the venue. We also shared as Diane mentioned, D. Davis mentioned, the lighting package rental.
When you
lighting
shared
package.
social media, did you do single postings for all three shows, or did you do individual postings?
We did. We hired someone to rep all three shows, and then rep us individually. So that
you had a combination of
Yeah, it
the
wasn't
repertory.
extensive. It was basically, yeah, they were sporadic, but it kept us in line with a time frame that worked with the collective. We each did our own individual additional, but this was a collective piece, which I think is important because it keeps the theme of what the collective is about and who we're about sort of together.
We made a logo. We built a logo. So we paid for the designer of the logo. Thank you to Kate for supplying that person to us. Yeah. So we did share, we right at the top, we said, what can we share? And then we figured out, and we saved a lot of money.
Yeah. Especially on space.
The venue was $7,000 a week.
Yeah.
Divided by 3.
Sounds like a good savings. Yes. Yeah. So once again, my mind is just racing. Were there any other questions from the room or no? I know what I wanted to ask. The cross marketing. Did you feel that the cross marketing was successful? Did you find that you were getting audiences from each other's audience bases?
I think.
I mean, I wouldn't over expect on something like that. I wouldn't expect a miracle, but
I think we could have done more with it. I do think we could have done more. We had like an idea at the beginning, buy this amount, you get 2 tickets, buy this amount, you get 3 different shows. We got overwhelmed. It was too much to be able to do. But I think that would have been like using the Fringe as a guide, buy a package of tickets. We didn't do that. I also
think our lead-in was not well planned in that regard. Like I said, we started 4 months. Productions usually start a year ahead of time. And so by the 6th month, you've got all your sort of, narrative assets in place. So when you have those opportunities, you're building a momentum. So we had podcasts or we had coverage throughout. But had we had that prior leading up, it would have been like a different kind of momentum. So I think that's the biggest lesson that we learned in terms of how do we have that relationship with the audiences.
But January is, while in some ways it felt like the best time to do something like this. In some ways it is, but then in many ways it's not because people are just coming off the holidays. Their money is spent, they're exhausted, it's winter. But I also think that there's a fundamental energy to indie theater, particularly where the slow build is from word of mouth, which requires a long performance time, right? So maybe if the funds are there to do it 2 months or 6 weeks, 10 weeks instead, that I think is a powerful asset for building audiences. And yeah, that's just one thing. I think that's the power of being together. Hopefully that slow slog could actually build a larger audience for everybody. But it does take time. It does take commitment of that slow burn type.
So your ticket, Sarah was asking about ticketing. So your ticketing did have built into it um, options for buying for all three companies. How did that work?
Yes. Yes, right. So that was all done through the theater. They ran the ticketing.
Yeah, we had do we have a Femme Collective page
Yeah.
with their, which is Ovation Ticks? We had that, which we could use for all Femme Collective outreach. And then we each had our own individual that we were sort of putting on our own social media site.
And websites.
Yeah, website. So the venue actually provided us with individual pages, but also a Femme Collective page, which is a lot to manage because they had to then manage those 4 pages as
Go
well.
Philip.
It was
Fran-
great. That was really great. The team at the Y, they're very professional, easygoing, friendly. They are very amicable to wanting it to be right and being
even though they weren't the original people that you spoke with,
yeah.
they treated you well.
Yep, he was great.
Well, it sounds like you also sort of drew a line for them and said, "Look, I've been doing this for a year. Help us." Um, Francine is asking the question that's always on everybody's mind: how did you raise money? But I want to ask a different question. In your raising of the money, um, did you did you do it individually? Uh, did you make it an asset that you were doing this in Reparatory? Do you think people were interested in supporting you because they knew that this was a new way of doing things? I'm curious. Would you even know that?
I'm going to be perfectly honest. I did not fundraise based around the Femme Collective because I was raising funds already for the play itself and any kind of grant. I got 2 grants, I got a grant. And so that was all for the production itself. So that takes, again, a lot of head time planning in terms of if we were all three interested in doing that, that would be that would be another level, probably the next level to go to be included.
Okay, so to get a little specific about this, so once you guys decided you were going to do this, you sat down and you figured out budgets. So each one of you committed to a certain amount, and the budgets were not the same for all three of you. So was there any danger in one of you not being able to raise the money that you needed to raise, and that would put the other two in a terrible situation or an awkward situation? Or did you just all approach it confidently and just raised what you had to raise?
There's a lot of trust involved, isn't there?
Yeah, there was a lot of like, oh, I got a check coming in. Can you wait 2 weeks?
Yeah, there was. Yeah.
There was that, but
Yeah.
it worked. People understood. Everyone seemed to understand need.
But that's the part that can be nervous making, just
Yeah.
waiting for the money to come in.
I don't know
Because
if that even crossed our minds though. Did we ever even say like, "Hey, what if you didn't?" I think.
I mean, I was
So
upfront.
stupid. What did we do?
I was doubling my budget from the 5, and I was like, I don't know where. But then I got into it. Then I was like, oh, this is an opportunity, make it happen. But I think going into it, when you decide to join the collective, if we were doing this again, we'd all have to come in with the venue fee. Like that is what you don't want to have to raise. when you sign that contract, which is pretty early in the process. So that has to already be in place before as
That
soon as
sounds that sounds smart.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Don't
We
you
didn't
can't commit
fundraise
a
on it either. Sorry.
Yeah.
so how
I
did
was
you
just
what was the fundraising like?
I didn't we had a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts for this project. And then we
Do you
also
still
had,
have a grants from the National Endowment for the
you
Arts?
know, we had we
Did
we
you lose
lost
money?
we had 2 great years with the NEA, and this year we lost $45,000 from the NEA
Is that all?
because we put the
Okay.
grant on pause. But for a company my size, we're an organization, so we have a very tight. Our annual budget is like $250,000. It's like a drop in the bucket. Still, we have to fight and claw to get that funding. But $45,000, that's two major programs, and a fifth of our budget. So that's painful.
So let me just switch gears and just ask Lorca and also Dee whether you've been affected by the budget cuts and the current administration's war against us.
I know. Well, we're city and state funded, so we're okay so far.
And
Knock wood.
We are too. City
But
and
I was
state.
going to say, in terms of raising funds, I have to say this was the first time that I had all the money I needed. Now, let me explain what happened. We didn't produce anything, and we kept getting supported. So I was so excited to be able to really put the money into the show, you know. Now I'm an idiot. Cindy's laughing because now I said to her, I spent it all. I gotta start over. But anyway, yeah, for our next, what we're doing next. But yeah, so because I had COVID relief money from 2023. We had money and people kept supporting us. So I was so happy and so thrilled. So I just have to say, it'll never happen again like that. But that was
It's a good thing
great.
to spend your money on artists. If you're
Yeah,
going to blow through your wad of money, you better spend it on artists. I'm all
we
for that.
did. And
Um,
we got it. We got an extra grant. I have to say, we got a $1,000 grant, and I was able to offer free tickets for $1,000 worth of free tickets to students. And I teach at the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute, and I was teaching at NYU at the time. And I had full rows of students coming, and I was so thrilled to be able to give them that opportunity. And I have to thank the N.W. Dybel Foundation for that. Yeah.
that's wonderful. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. Owen, I see a lot of questions now. Do you want to bring them into the room?
Yeah, sure. Oh geez, wow, there are a lot. All right, let's start with Marilyn Anderson. How did you each choose your shows?
Or had you chosen them before you got together?
Already chosen.
Yeah. Mine was a piece that I had done a workshop at. I just graduated from the playwriting cohort at Columbia, and so I had done this as a second year thesis workshop, and I happened to have a phenomenal director. And when I had the opportunity to say, "Hey, do you want to take this to the next level?" That's when we decided to do that play.
Ours
Okay.
was a fulfillment of the NEA grant, and it was uh, a devised production about
Loose.
eight of Shakespeare's heroines, sort of a fairy tale being uh, yeah, it was an interesting exploration, and that was it. We did our first iteration of Out Here Outdoors at Longhouse Reserve, where we are in residence as a performing arts company, and so it was really our second iteration because, as anyone who might be a devising person knows, it's a very expensive craft to have a devising theater practice, and you have to show it again and again and again to keep it moving forward. And so right now we're looking at it going to Reykjavik through with a woman's
Can I ask you, for the sake of the audiences out there who might not know, can you explain a little bit what divisive theater is?
Sure. It's the way we practice it is for me it's very much about what is happening in the world and what do we want to reflect back about that. And it's making up the story, and you're in rehearsal, and it's a company practice. So you're all in it together. You're working through movement and storytelling. You're imagining things together. A lot. You're trying things. We had 5 different endings for this show before we actually landed on the one that we have now. And it's really essentially writing a script together, creating the story. And so, it's quite delicious, and it's a lot of work, and it's the process, which is what I love the most, even more than performing it, actually. So it's, yeah, going from nothing to something. And as we know, filling in the blanks and making things more specific, and making the characters more deeply connected, and having something deeper to express, and the storylines much more higher staked, comes with more and more audience participation, and showing it again and again. So it's
And
it's a
and the contrast, the simple contrast is basically it's different from a written script that you come in and you produce a
I have
script
no
that's been
script.
written.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
You often don't have a script until late in the process. Yeah.
right. So you're devising it as you go along. Um,
It's conceptual. It's conceptual.
so Owen, am I losing you at 6:30, or can you ask questions
Yeah, I'm
first?
gonna have to jet out pretty quick. But I'll ask from Anika, what did you learn from this experience? What worked and what would you change if you were to do it again?
I think we probably covered a few of those already, but I think a longer lead time would have helped. Part of it was that the theater couldn't commit until later. So that was one thing that we did have to wait on. I think a longer lead time for the collective itself, rather than, because we were each working. I mean, I've been working on my show for a year before we did it. And I mean, in pre-prep, pre-production. So I think that's one, have a longer lead time. What else? Diane, you said something else that I think.
I think production meetings. That's something we didn't really like figure, and we all had very busy schedules.
Yes, we needed more
But
production.
I will say, I just did, it was two 29-hour development workshops on a new play, but they were like 2 months apart, but they were connected to each other. So me and the producer started meeting in January for end of March and April, these workshops. And we met every week. And that was a huge asset. And I realized, without that, you're not really communicating clearly, because emails are just, they're not meant to do the planning, that in person, and then give yourself enough time in those meetings. A lot of people, schedule them for an hour and a half, or schedule them for 2 hours. And if they end early, great. But that you always give yourself enough time to be thorough. Because the one thing that I realized that made those two workshops run like clockwork, not a glitch out, was the incredible planning that we had done in the production meetings.
Good point, because we did that individually.
Yeah, yeah.
We did that for our shows, but we needed that additional time for the collective, for the tech. That's right. Good point. Yeah.
And
Um,
consistency, like every time, same time.
I think we didn't really answer Francine's question because I diverted it. But how did you raise the money? What do you, was there? There's no magic to it. It's how anybody raises money. You ask for money. You have a donor base. You have people that support you and like what you do, and you go to them and say, "Look, this is what I want to do. Would you donate?" Are you all three not-for-profits?
No, fiscal sponsor.
Yeah.
I'm a not-for-profit. We are, yeah.
Oh, Lorca, you're fiscally sponsored? Well, this essentially you can still take
Yeah, we
take
use their
donations.
not-for-profit status. Yeah.
And people can donate as a charitable donation and use it on their taxes. Catherine Paulson, I think, is asking whether 3 was the magic number, or do you think that 2 or 4 companies would work just as well?
3.
3 worked well for us because also we had we had a month, so we each had 10 shows. So I don't know. I think 3 was good.
Yeah, I think once you get into larger numbers, you're in a festival mode, and it's just a lot of hats in the ring. There's another organization called The Pool, which also works in threes. I guess it's the rule of three.
It's the rule of three, of course.
We like odd numbers.
Cindy asked something she probably knows the answer to it. Did you have a written agreement with the three companies? Did you have an attorney?
No.
We had a contract with a venue.
We got really lucky. Now we're finding out all the things we need to do next time right now in this session right now.
I have to go on record as recommending that people have an attorney and have an agreement.
But we talked about it. And again, going back to the accountant that I said earlier about Alan Pearl, and Alan basically said, try it out, see what happens. You don't have to. I mean, we all knew each other. Diane and I went to Bennington College together, so we know each other a long time. And then Kate, we've known each other through the league, and so we knew where to find each other. If we had, we knew where they lived.
So did you all get out of this experience what you wanted, what you were hoping for, possibly more than you were hoping for, and are you already planning your next projects?
Both,
so,
yeah.
So, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. When you do a workshop, it's on its way to its world premiere. That's how I see my plays, in workshop mode. I had jumped the gun earlier, thinking that the first production is the world premiere, but it's not, because workshops allow you to develop the play. So it's a great opportunity to actually work through the writing. I wrote for a month right up until we froze the script, and which was tech. And so that opportunity to rewrite every single night, I think, is something that for a playwright you usually don't get.
So you were calling it a workshop, but it was a showcase technically because of the agreement.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring that up is because most writers in this room, and you probably also know it, there's something that's been going around for about 10, 15 years called premieritis. Basically, theaters around the country who don't want to look at your work unless they think it's going to be a world premiere. So great.
That's where doing and getting the funding to do these kinds of showcases allow you to develop your work, so that when I send this out now, I have the capacity to say, this is ready for that world premiere. Whether this one is or not, I don't know, the one we did, but I'm doing that with my next production already, because I realize that's going to take a couple years down the pike.
Well, I think that we're trying to get regional theaters off of this, and we're also trying to get them to understand that doing a showcase with 12 or 16 performances, even though it's a paid audience, it really doesn't have to be called a world premiere. And some of them think that it should be, and I don't agree.
It depends.
It's basically, it's what you're calling, you're workshopping, it's development.
But mine was a world premiere.
Yes,
I'll explain it. And it was, I never mentioned, the play was called January, which we did in January by Paula Zismar, brilliant playwright. I directed. Paula submitted her play to MultiStages to our New Works contest in 2015. It was a finalist. We then put it into the script development series and presented it as a script development series piece. We worked on it. Then I went off and did something else during the pandemic, and all the horrible things that were happening. It was Uvalde. When the massacre happened in Uvalde, my play was about gun control. It was basically a young boy who brings a gun to school and kills another kid, and the story is about the mothers, the aftermath with the mothers. When Uvalde happened, I contacted her and said, we got to do your play. And so we've been working on this play for a very long time, on and off, And so when this was ready to go, it was ready to go. And she was on Zoom. She lives in California. She was on Zoom for every single rehearsal, and the tech was hysterical, on the iPad, just watching the tech being built. But it was a world premiere. We were ready for a world premiere. So it kind of depends, I think, on the piece. Diane's was fairly new. This was something that had been in development for 10 years.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm saying is that it sometimes is a challenge, because if you declared this as a world premiere, and you want to get a production of it at a theater in California, and they'll say, "Well, we wanted the world premiere."
I know.
There are ways of getting around it, and it's silly. It's just silly.
I grabbed it though.
But
You
I think
grabbed
it's
it.
an important thing to extrapolate in that how can we, as theater makers, continue to create scenarios such as this, or there's other models, I'm sure, where we take back the reins a little bit for the playwrights, for the people creating the work, to normalize the importance and the generosity of spirit needed, required to develop works, the importance of how do we keep educating, and I don't mean that in a like that kind of way. I just mean how do we keep informing and educating American audiences, particularly how this is done and what artists need, what writers need, what theater creators need to do this work. I always try to explain this to people that it's a long-armed craft. It takes many audiences. It takes many levels of creating. And I really think that's one thing that's we can do with this type of situation is continue to make opportunities collectively together to normalize this experience of this is a new work. This is draft 4. This is the 4th time I'm showing it. This is where we're working to get to. Maybe next time will be a premiere. And I get it. That's exciting. We love world premieres, but I'm so sick of this craft doesn't happen like that. It's not just something you put in the microwave. It's something that takes many iterations and deep searching and deep, hitting your head against the wall of what you're creating and struggling with those words. So it's in our hands. We have to do it. We have to create the opportunities for one another together to keep normalizing what we need, the structure of what we need, and to get audiences and theaters excited about being part of that. So.
And also, playwriting in and of itself is not an overnight thing. It takes, the gestation of a play take my I worked with Rogelio Martinez, who says, "Yeah, I don't always write what I think I want to write because I realize I'm going to spend the next 4 years working on it before it gets out there." So I've only been working on Broken Thread 2 years. My new one was only 5 months. So
I'm a playwright, by the way. I've never spent less than 2 years working on a play. And I have one musical that I wrote that took me 12 years.
Yeah, well, musicals, the bottom number is 8.
Hamlet was 8. That was the base. Yeah.
Yeah. And most plays, like my friends who are doing they did their premiere at Second Stage recently.
How nice.
That was 7 years in the making. So that was after 7 years since the first draft. So it definitely takes a lot of time. Not everybody. I mean, some get that they just have that special moment, but the majority of us are in that kind of realm.
I'm going to grab the last couple questions here. And
Judy asked a question.
That's the one I was about to address. How does the fiscally supported type of theater allow donors to take deductions? Since I'm a fiscal sponsor, I might as well talk about it. TRU is a fiscal sponsor. We are a 501c3. We have the option of umbrellaing a company that does not have not-for-profit status, and the money has to be given to us. The donations have to go to the not-for-profit, and then we keep your bank balance. We keep register. We require the invoices so that we can pay stuff, and we prefer to pay everybody directly. Sometimes we'll reimburse the fiscal sponsoree, but we don't like to. I would rather just pay everything directly to the vendors. That's how that basically works. Because we're a 501c3, any money that's given to TRU as a sponsor of another company is tax deductible. And you not only that, but you also get sales tax waived. So now that's the good news. The bad news is I'm really going to be pulling back on fiscal sponsorships going forward because of very complicated tax reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's different with what we have for knife fractured atlas. Yeah, they actually take a percentage.
We take
No,
a percentage too, yeah.
they get a percentage, but whatever is in my account, they mail directly into my account. So whatever the donation is, like we just received a $250 one, that's what we got.
Well, we keep it in our bank account. We
Yeah.
pay
But
the
I'm
bills
saying
for you.
these other companies don't do that. They push it back to you.
My accountant told me this is how I had to do it, so I'm doing this. So right.
The
So
other question Judy had though was about tech, and she's right. That's the other thing. Back to Annika, we needed more tech time.
Oh
So I
yeah.
would say, yeah, we really did. So I
Yeah.
would say that we each had like we each had a full day, a full 12-hour day, and then we had a couple of halfies.
One
Yeah,
happy
we
each.
needed more than that. Yes,
Yeah.
a few halfies, remember? Please
Yeah.
keep recording.
So you need, and I think originally in our calendar we had 7 days locked, and then we realized, oh, how do we get then we had to get the performances in. So it's tricky, but I think we gone to Friday Tech, where we had 5 solid days, it would have been very different than we had three,
Right.
4 days.
We just didn't have enough time. And part of that was equity, having to move up. Yeah.
quick answer to Susan Crawford. Um, they each produced their own work. The question I was asking Lorca and Dee and Kate was, what were the staff things that you shared? So the implication is that anything that they didn't share, they were doing on their own. So yes, they had their own directors, they had their own casts, and they were, in effect, they were producing their individual shows as well as producing a collective presentation of 3 shows. And
Correct.
I think one other, yes. Why don't you tell us what you have planned? That's a great way to end. We can talk about what you have coming up for the future. Kate Mueth, what's Neopolitical Cowgirls up to?
Thanks for asking. We are working on taking the She-Wolves overseas
Great.
for its next life. And right now I'm working on probably a short 1 hour-ish excerpt exploration dance theater in the woods at Longhouse Reserve outdoors, exploring the witches of Macbeth for a Macbeth production that's coming up that my husband will be directing, and we'll be doing indoors in the spring and then outdoors at Longhouse. So digging down into that.
How about Dee? What's Eden Theater coming
Um,
planning?
I have a new play called A Meditation on Hope, which is a 7-woman wonder, I think. And so I'm in development. I'm looking to do a performance workshop of it. And Eden Theater is interested in we're starting a new thing in 2026 called the series, and it will be 3 generative playwrights, and then we are going to put those up over successive weekends in workshop performances.
And Lorca, how about MultiStages?
So Cindy talked about it. I don't know if that was pre-recorded or not, but Cindy Cooper, playwright and founder of Repro Freedom Arts, and I are going to be collaborating on Repro Eco, which are 6 short plays dealing with the environment, dealing with toxic waste, plastics, and trying to have babies. And also trying to figure out how to not have babies in the world that we're in. So it's an exciting venture, and we're doing our next stage of it. We did a series of readings back in October. So in September, we're going to be out at Culture Art, which is run by Tess Howsam, she's a good friend of Kate's. And we'll be working out there in Long Island City and working with Jennifer Chin, who's a marvelous choreographer, and then hoping to take it to a full production. So it's sort of a black box moving forward. So I have that, and then another festival that we're working on, which I can't talk about yet, but it has to do with new musicals.
New musicals.
Yes.
I want to hear more about that. I'm gonna remove spotlights from my guests, and I'm going to say a few words to the YouTube audience out there. So first of all, I want to thank Dee, Lorca, and Kate for being with me today. I appreciate the conversation very much. I think it was a useful conversation for so many people. I hope it's also inspires some thoughts about other ways of making theater happen for us in this very difficult city of Manhattan, New York. Boy, it's hard to produce here. Boy, it's really hard. So I want to thank my community. I want to thank everybody that comes and sits in on these conversations every week. The members of the TRU community, I appreciate you very much. And for those of you out there who just found us, welcome. I hope that you like what we do, and I hope you'll become part of us. If you want to be invited and be part of the room and ask questions and be part of the conversation to some degree, just email me. I'm easy. Just email me. trunltd@aol.com. trunltd@aol.com. We'll send you a Zoom link every week. Next week we're going to be interviewing Stephen McKenna from the park. Oh boy, he's in Minnesota. He's this amazing guy who is an artistic director of a company in Minnesota, and he also does international work. It's crazy what he does. Steve Domena, it's Park Square Theater. That's it in St. Paul.
Oh.
Then we're going to take off for 4th of July. This, in 5 years, I've never taken off, except maybe I think one Christmas. But I've never taken off for 4th of July because it's never been on the Friday the 4th. So it's Friday the 4th. So I figure somebody's going to want a hot dog. So we're going to let you go have your hot dog and fireworks. Then the week after that, we have Peter Avery, who's the director of theater for the New York City Department of Education. And he's going to talk about the arts programs that he creates for children in schools. He's very successful at it. And I'm probably going to ask him whether there's any pushback from our current administration that he might find threatening or concerning. After that, we're going to be doing theater awards. We're going to talk about the meaning of theater awards. And we have people coming from the Drama Desk Awards, the Off-Broadway Alliance Awards, New York IT Awards. And then after that, on the 25th, I want everybody to make a note of this. We're going to be doing an introduction to our producer program. Jane Dubin, who teaches our master class, and Blair Russell, who will be teaching our foundations class in the fall, starting in September, will talk about the program for you and answer your questions. So I hope to see as many of you as possible in the weeks to come. We started off doing this as a service, so we are free. However, it is absolutely possible to pay us for this service that we offer. It's really possible. You can go in and you can spend $12 for a ticket instead of clicking the free button. And if you want to give us a donation, we'd be very grateful. As we just talked about at the beginning of our conversation with the Femme Collective, it's a lot more expensive now than it used to be making anything happen. So your support will be welcome. Go to TRU Donate, trudonate.com. That's trudonate.com. Hope to see you in the weeks to come. And that's it for today. Thank you.